Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a bunch of homeowner association bylaw officers raided my farm property and demanded that I pay them monthly dues. I'm not even part of this fraudulent HOA. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. Well, if you've been snooping around this subreddit for a while, you already know that Asia has a bit of an HOA problem. And by that I mean it's huge and not technically an HOA. I never knew what to call them, but the internet has been using that term, HOA, so it must be better than neighborhood terrors or the group that harasses everybody and seems to be in charge. Similar to an HOA, they are a group running my neighborhood and getting people to join and pay them money every month. The main difference being there is zero government regulations and the money people give is more out of fear than thinking it will actually go back to the community. I am one of the few that don't want to give them money and join their little club. Some would wonder if it kept me safe from them, why not just give them what they want and basically let them rob me on a monthly basis. I would love to just lie and say that I'm brave and want to stand up to them or something cool. In reality, I just don't have enough money to pay them off and keep myself alive. Especially with how often they want more money or harass people anyway. Working on a farm costs a lot of money and in their minds that just means I need to give them a whole lot more than if I had a small property. Up to this point I had dealt with some generic threats and harassment to join. They must have finally decided to just go for it with me because one day the leader showed up with his team of neighborhood enforcement officers. Now I should probably explain what I mean by that, so basically the leader has some people that are like his own little police force. We call them raiders around here because the only thing they seem to do for him is raid homes to harass people for money and steal things. Anyway, they all showed up and the leader decided to have a talk with me. Leader, you still haven't paid any of your fines to us. Me, I never actually joined, so I don't have fines. I was trying to sound brave, but it was not fooling anybody. Leader, if you're not gonna pay us, then we might just need to take a look around and see what we find that adds up to that amount. Maybe you got something useful in that barn, open it up. My barn was locked and I had some very expensive tools, including a tractor. I could not let them take that away, or I would just be ruined in business. Me, look, I'm not opening my barn for you to steal from me. Leader, steal? We are just trying to get what you owe us. We would hate to need to come down here and beat you up in order to get the door open. I'm a nice guy, so I will give you a couple more days to give me the money I want. If not, then I think I made it very clear what's gonna happen. There was no way I was getting the money, but I realized that I might be smarter than he is. My farm is old, but we live in modern times and technology can be very useful. I knew he was coming back in 2 days and I was not gonna have money for him then either. What I did have enough of were a couple of security cameras that I could hide and catch whatever the raiders ended up doing or stealing from my farm. Like clockwork, they came back 2 days later once again, demanding I give them money. When finally faced between opening the barn and getting possibly killed from the raiders attacking me, I agreed to open the barn. Not before another threat of getting beat up was set and recorded on my hidden cameras. They did not end up taking my tractor, but instead almost everything else of value in that barn. I had a cousin that worked for police about 3 hours away. I contacted him with the video and asked if it was enough to take the HOA down. I had to make sure that what I did would cause them to go to jail, otherwise they would more than likely kill me. It was like going up against a mafia and part of me wanted to back out of doing it. My cousin was sure that what I had was good enough and to contact my police. That was a 45-minute drive due to how rural of an area I lived in. They were aware of the issues happening in the country with these groups. They even admitted that they couldn't do much due to lack of evidence and people being too scared to speak out. My video showed them threatening me and then forcing me to open the barn before taking things. They started an investigation against the group and sent in police undercover to buy a house in the neighborhood and see what happened. Of course, the leader showed up about the HOA and started out nicely. When the police said they had no interest, he started making threats and telling them that they could either pay him themselves or he would send his raiders into the home to take it by force. He admitted it basically in front of a police officer and was put into handcuffs right away. They got his computer, record books, etc. His fake HOA mafia business was exposed and the police now knew everybody involved and exactly what crimes they committed. Once in custody, people felt safe to tell the cops everything, and that just meant more testimony and a higher chance of them all going to jail. So the HOA was gone, and it was like everybody could relax and actually survive without losing money or valuables constantly. It turns out that most of the things they stole got sold, and most of that went to drugs and alcohol. What didn't was not able to be traced, which meant there was a small downside to this ending. No items and no money meant that there was no way for the police to get us anything back, so whatever had been lost to them over the last couple of years was just fully gone. I felt bad because of my farm equipment, but even worse for people that were paying every month and not being able to get anything back from that. No new group has started, so I hope that this area can stay free from the HOA gangs. I don't want to tell anybody here in Asia to be a hero and stand up to these guys and get them arrested. I just as easily could have been killed for what I did instead of coming out on top. Just know that at least some police know about the situation and maybe can find a way to stop more from cropping up and ending the ones that currently exist. It's more than likely just a dream, but if I didn't have hope, then who knows where I would be right now. I know some people in the comments want a more exact location on me, but understand that I left it vague for safety reasons. I don't want other people showing up or anybody finding out what I did that might have been connected with the leader. I think it is great that we are all sharing these stories, but I also think it's better to keep locations private down in the chat so nobody ends up in trouble. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would agree with that. It's definitely important to stay anonymous on the internet, at least in some cases, and I think in OP's case it definitely makes sense. He dealt with some really bad people there, and I wouldn't want that any one of them, or anyone that is left that is not in jail, is seeking vengeance or something. Anyway, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is a malicious compliance story. This story took place in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house looking after people. However, after our daughter was born, she did not want a job that put her on the road so much and shifts in the evening, so she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near our community. Two things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habit. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country. So the local boss hired my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tied. Louise was the boss who hired her best friend Donna, Donna's brother Dan, and Louise's niece Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. She immediately saw things were not quite on the level. Even though my wife was paid from 4 PM to midnight, she was home by 8 PM every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents, and other shady stuff. My wife also saw Louise threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. Louise's husband was a senior NCO in the unit, but jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to her ethics. However, after a few months, the racial epithets started. It started with a nickname. It then morphed into slurs and then rumors about her. They started telling racial jokes without trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the 4 of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak and they threatened her unemployment. My wife told them that she would go to the head office, so she called the head office from work. Stuart from HR dressed down my wife over women's talk, and she needed to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities instead. Stuart said that no laws have been broken, so she should go to the authorities. Good luck. Later that shift, she was fired for attitude, so my wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. She gave both photocopies of her logs. The human rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviors. That garnered an apology and an acknowledgement from Stuart with a smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled in the tenancy buildings had reported that they suspected they had been snooped through. The dates of some of their reports matched my wife's logs on the dates she was there. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties. A violation of an abuse of authority statute. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per day. The base pulled the security and key logs showing that work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the commission's investigation determined that they were in violation. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company, and they found out others were having similar issues. As a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract broken after the 2nd year. Louise, Donna, Dan and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in, all personnel had to undergo vetting for security, all cleaning was done during the day, preventing people from rifling desks, 40 hours was 40 hours, and cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond casual "how are you" conversations. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while she wonders what Stuart thinks of women's talk now. Update to the story: I'm Canadian, I grew up in bilingual communities, French and English, and my various school systems I attended growing up had an impact on my spellings. Realized behavior, skeptical, etc. The desk snooping was in the base housing offices, the 4 cleaners all lived in base housing. So they were looking up gossip-worthy material on their neighbors and friends, etc. They were also looking to see what major contracts were coming for house repairs, in other words, window replacement. It was not classified material. While the 4 of them lost employment, they were not held accountable. The company that had the contract just laid them off, so they were able to find work again shortly. However, just not as cleaners. Cleaners had a reliability screening to work on the base even prior to this. However, it is as simple as a criminal record check, not much more. After this, the cleaners never worked in an area without supervision and always during the same workday as the people in the offices. The NCO who chastised the soldier was called to task for that. He ended up getting moved a year later, with a bit of a shadow following him. However, it didn't last long and there was no permanent career mark left. Finally, we were very young, my wife and I are, and we're not the type to rock the boat. I was brand new in the military and didn't want to be labeled as a problem soldier. So we remained quiet for too long. After this, both of us grew our confidence and were able to move on. We don't stay quiet too long when something is not right. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. I, 44 female, work in an office of 20 plus people. The youngest is Jenny, 28 female, who started to work for us just this year. Jenny immediately clicked with our coworker Dan, 47 male, and became close with him even though they work on different floors. Dan is married and Jenny is single. For the past months I've heard other people in the office gossip about Dan and Jenny, who always leave the office to have lunch together outside. Most of us bring our own lunch and eat in the pantry, and Dan and Jenny both used to do this too. Now they are usually gone for an hour or two, and Jenny always asks me if I want her to grab coffee for me exactly when they leave, so I assume they eat lunch and have coffee after, but some of my coworkers wonder if this is all that is happening. This week Dan was on leave and Jenny stayed in the office for lunch, so I took the opportunity to tell her that it doesn't look good for her to be spending too much time with Dan, as it makes people wonder if there's something going on between them. Jenny was upset and asked if people wonder about that or if I wonder about that, so I told her the truth that I've heard other people gossiping. She said she feels insulted that I even needed to tell her this because it means I believe it might be true. For the record, I don't think there's anything going on between Jenny and Dan, but I understand how it might look that way, and I only told Jenny to look out for her so she could do something about it if she wanted to. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP is being the a-hole here or not? Someone on Reddit said, "You are the a-hole and so are the gossiping coworkers. Why would you tell her that it doesn't look good for her? Here's the one that is married." Comment number 2, so you talk to the person in the situation with the least power and the most to lose, aka the young woman. Doesn't sound like you have requested the coworkers to stop gossiping. Haven't gone to HR about the gossiper's unprofessional behavior either. Have not looked into whether Dan might be abusing his power and position. You told the new young hire that she is doing something that others perceive perceive as wrong. This is the epitome of systemic sexism in the workplace. You should feel guilty for participating in it. You are the a-hole. Comment number 3, you are the a-hole. You chose to say something to her but not to him. Why? Why wouldn't you warn him, especially since you've known him longer? Why is it anyone's business? Spoiler alert, men and women can be platonic friends. The next one is titled, The First Job Can Be the Worst. I got my first job working weekends at my local branded corner shop. It was a minute's walk from home and pretty easy evening shifts on Saturday and Sunday, plus I would pick up any extra shifts from other staff whenever they asked due to holidays and sickness for a little bit of extra money. Apart from my job interview, I never saw the manager, let's call her Felicity because why not, on site except when she came in as a customer. Not a big deal, since Felicity paid into my bank account accurately for the hours I worked and all my shift changes were dealt with by the assistant manager who I got along with very well. It is also worth noting that I'm not a confrontational person in the slightest, or at least I was not back then, but F Felicity, not in that way though. About 6 months of smooth sailing later, the assistant manager has left to run a new store of the same brand, and a new one is brought on board straight away. Spoiler alert, we will call him Gary, and Carrie is a douche canoe. And by the way guys, that's one of my favorite words. Right next to douche nozzle. But anyway, the first weekend he is with me, Saturday and Sunday evenings with zero issues work-wise, I show him what I typically do in regards to restocking and other basic menial work between serving customers. At the close of that first weekend on the Sunday, I sat with Gary in the office and mentioned about that whenever a shift change was last minute. I would go to the old Gary and the hours and wages would be sorted through them by the time payroll is completed. Immediately this becomes a problem for him as all shift changes must be approved by himself or the manager beforehand. I said that is fine, but sometimes I get a call very late at night or very early in the morning to cover someone sick for the open at 5 AM, so what should I do? His answer, that is their problem, they should not be sick. Amazing. The toxic attitude is not the problem, however, it is that this meeting took place on Sunday night after closing. Now, as a side note, I play golf and back then I was pretty decent for a 16-year-old. I had qualified through a local and then regional competition and was in the final of an amateur tournament to be held at St. Andrews on a Saturday and Sunday. This was happening a couple of weeks after the above, and so I had it booked off and approved long in advance. It was easily the biggest competition of my golfing career and a chance to go play at the home of golf on the old course. The next Saturday comes around, having not heard anything further regarding shifts, and upon heading in at my usual time, Gary is there and does not say a word to me in greeting and barely says a thing to me all shift. This is not an issue to me, I have already clocked him as a toxic F-knuckle, so kept my head down and did my job as usual. At closing he locks up but stays on the premises, which is a little out of the ordinary. But I think nothing of it and head home. The next day's shift is the very same, hardly a thing is said to me, and at closing he again sends me on my way but stays on site. As far as I am concerned, it is not my problem. Monday morning, however, turns out it very much is a problem. As I am getting ready for college, a knock at my door reveals 4 police officers, and after confirming that I am indeed me, and yes, I worked at that store last night, I am grabbed, placed in handcuffs and arrested for theft. Off to the Nick we go. After a few hours of being booked in, searched and left in a cell with no answers to any questions of what this theft supposedly is, I finally get asked if I know where Gary is. After mentioning that the last time I saw him was at the close of the shop the night before, when he stayed on site, I am told I was seen on CCTV by Felicity taking money, what happened to be the entire week's cash takings from the office safe along with Gary, and then leaving. This ends up being a fairly circular thing, with me stating I was not in the office at any point last night since I have no need to go in at any point with a manager on shift, and no, I don't know where Gary was, nor do I know how much money has been taken, or that I have taken anything myself. I have access to the office, keep at entry, but no safe key, only Gary and Felicity at those. For clarification, the safe allowed you to drop money in, but required a key for access, and on the opens the tills along with enough money in small change were left out of the safe for whomever was in. I end up back in a cell for a time. Once the door reopens in the afternoon, I am very swiftly told that I had been mistakenly identified at the CCTV and then released. In as much as there was only one person seen on camera, and it clearly isn't me. They then apologized as they had acted on the information from Felicity that morning before being able to obtain the footage for themselves. So yeah, at least I got a ride home and a day off, I suppose. By this point, my mom had been informed of what happened and left work herself, and after a polite sit-down with the two officers over a cuppa, as the story was cleared up, Red as her 5'2" and size 6 frame looked ready to tear the 6-foot step vest wearing officers apart from the ankles up, we are pretty much left laughing in disbelief at the whole situation. By this point, I am just more relieved than anything. Once the officers have gone, we pretty much follow them out the door and walk straight to the shop as they informed us Felicity is on site, along with another officer looking through all the CCTV they have of Gary. So we head through to the back, like I said above, non-confrontational. I was pissed off for certain, but I was not in trouble anymore, so why bother getting any angrier? Felicity immediately apologized to me over what happened, I think a little under protest under the eyes of the officer, and maybe my mother standing there with a face like thunder. The apology came in the crappy form of, "Sorry what happened to you, but," excuse in that she had the wrong CCTV file loaded up. She then goes that one bit further and states that since they were now down on staff for the weekend, I would have to have my holiday this coming weekend cancelled. Both me and my mom, also a golfer, laughed out loud, genuinely thinking it was a joke. But nope, dead serious, she comes out with the whole, "Well, you can work it or look for a new job" phrase. I just smiled, thanked her for the opportunity, but that she can F right off. I turned around and had to gently shove my growingly apologetic and lightly frothing at the mouth mother outside. As for the revenge part, it's pretty simple unfortunately. I got in touch with the area manager after the weekend. I was ready to just leave it, but at my mother's insistence I was to tell the higher-ups. They had heard about what had happened, but had not been told the part of my wrongful arrest or my reason for quitting. After all, I was a part-timer, just a little cock in a little industry, and having never worked a shift with Felicity even once, she and I had no working relationship. The area manager actually had the decency of coming to meet me in person a few weeks later at a coffee shop in the city to talk about my experience and ask if I wanted to take my constructive dismissal to a tribunal. I declined as I had already gotten a new job, and jokingly all I was really worried about at the time was picking up Steel Battalion, which had just released from the game store 2 doors down before they sold out. They laughed and then went on to inform me that after a very short and very easy investigation, had found Felicity to have been very neglectful in both how she handled the theft and myself. But also that she had put herself down as being on shift every weekend at the same time as me to make up for her hours. She was fired immediately and was trying to take it to a tribunal in an attempt to protect herself. I wrote a statement there and then in that coffee shop highlighting all of the above issues. The area manager left to take a phone call and came back with the big-ass box containing Steel Battalion and its massive hotas. I still think that was a fair exchange and I still got the controller. The police updated me that Gary was caught 200 miles away a couple of months later trying to buy drugs from an undercover cop. Only a small fraction of the money was recovered and he was already well known to the police up there. He had only been out of prison for a few weeks before starting at the shop. The staff told me the company took Felicity to court and she was ordered to repay the missing amount due to negligence. It's probably worth mentioning that cash was very much of the main way of paying back then. I don't know the amount owed, but it was certainly several thousands of pounds. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.